අද්විතීය 200 Mbps ස්පීඩ් එකකින් ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ වේගවත්ම සහ පුළුල්තම හෝම් බ්‍රෝඩ්බෑන්ඩ් සම්බන්ධතාවය වන SLT මොබිටෙල් දේශයේ ෆයිබර් බලවේගය ඔබත් අදම අත්විඳින්න.
හරිම සුදුයි.
Tonight on First at 9. This Friday, the 9th of June 2023. Sensitive to national security. A parliamentary committee recommends against the proposed privatization of Sri Lanka Telecom.
අසාදු ලේඛනගත කර සංවිධානයකට කිසිදු කොටසක් මෙලදී ගැනීමට තගේ ජාතික වත්කම් පාලනය කිරීමට ඉඩ නොදිය යුතුය.
President's office meanwhile assures policy decisions taken will not compromise national security, contrary to report's recommendations. Pressing issues. Global Sovereign Debt Roundtable to meet today to discuss matters related to debt in countries including Sri Lanka.
And we're also putting in place a technical group to discuss some issues in depth, with the first meeting scheduled on June 9th of this technical group.
Connectivity. India in the process of considering provision of funding Sri Lanka's Palale International Airport runway extension.
Alliance Finance මෙතුරු රන්වයි සේවාවෙන් රන් පවුම්කට රුපියල් 1,70,000ක ඉහළ අධිකාරම.
ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දෙනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟමැති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9 with Indivadi Amuwata. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
And a warm welcome. You're joining us tonight on First at 9. And we take a look at briefly your top stories tonight. A committee recommends against the privatization of Sri Lanka Telecom, and policy decision will not compromise national security, says the President's office. Also in headlines today, Global Sovereign Debt Roundtable meets today, and connectivity issues are discussed when the Indian envoy meets Minister Nimal Siripal de Silva. Also on neutral policy of Sri Lanka, Russian ambassador commends Sri Lanka. And now on to your top story tonight. The Sectoral Oversight Committee on National Security says it will not recommend privatizing Sri Lanka Telecom as matters sensitive to national security could be at risk of being exposed. Issuing a report, the committee pointed out that the privatization of Sri Lanka Telecom would expose the country's critical communication infrastructure and sensitive information to private entities, which could compromise national security and result in several other detrimental effects. The chairman of the Sectoral Oversight Committee on National Security, Sarath Veerasekara, today proceeded to present the committee's recommendations to Parliament. Sectoral Oversight Committee on National Security issued its recommendations against the privatization of Sri Lanka Telecom, citing the possible compromise of matters sensitive to national security. This was presented in a report by the committee chairman, Sarath Veerasekara, to Parliament today. As per the report, the Sectoral Oversight Committee on National Security highlighted that further privatization of Sri Lanka Telecom could expose the country's critical communication infrastructure and sensitive information to private entities whose profit-oriented interests can compromise national security. The report also illustrated that SRT fixed connections are provided to diplomatic missions, high-level public sector corporates, businesses, defense services and the police. This translates to a high risk of information to important subscribers being compromised if the company is privatized. The Sectoral Oversight Committee added that if privatization takes place, the government would lose control and will be unable to surveil which subscribers are tapped and monitored, with detailed call records of VVIPs and security agencies open to extraction and suspicious dissemination. The committee went on to recommend that national security is not only protection against military attacks, but it involves non-military dimensions such as economic security, energy security, food security and cyber security. The report notes that government must ensure non-state actors should not have easy access to vital information that would affect national security.
ශ්‍රී ලංකා ටෙලිකොම් ආයතනය දැනටමත් අර්ධ වශයෙන් පෞද්ගලීකරණය කර ඇති අතර ජාත්‍යන්තර සමාගම් සතුව කොටස් වලින් 44.98%ක්ද රජයට කොටස් 49.5%ක්ද ඇත. තවදුරටත් පුද්ගලීකරණය කිරීම මගින් රටෙහි තීරණාත්මක සංනිවේදන යටිතල පහසුකම් සංවේදී තොරතුරු ලාභයේ ඉලක්ක කරගත් අභිලාෂයන් සහිත ජාතික ආරක්ෂාවට තර්ජනයක් විය හැකි පුද්ගලික ආයතන වෙත නිරාවරණය වනු ඇත. එබැවින් ටෙලිකොම් ආයතනය පෞද්ගලීකරණය නිර්දේශ නොකරයි. ත්‍රස්තවාදීන්ට අන්තවාදීන්ට කුමන ආකාරයකින් උපකාර කළ කිසිවෙකුට අසාදු ලේඛනගත කර සංවිධානයකට කිසිදු කොටසක් මෙලදී ගැනීමට සහ අපගේ ජාතික වත්කම් පාලනය කිරීමට ඉඩ නොදිය යුතුය. ගිවිසුමේ විධිවිධාන සලසා ඇති පරිදි රජයට ටෙලිකොම්හි අනිකුත් විශාල කොටස් හිමියා සතු කොටස් ආපසු මිලදී ගත හැකි අතර එම කොටස් සංවේදී සහ අවධානමට ලක් විය හැකි අතිරික්ත ඉඩම් සහ ගොඩනැගිලි තීරණාත්මක යටිතල පහසුකම් සහ ව්‍යාපාර ලෙස බෙදා දැක්විය හැකිය. ජාතික ආරක්ෂාවට බලපාන පළමු කොටස් රඳවා ගනිමින් තීරණාත්මක යටිතල පහසුකම් ආරක්ෂා කිරීම සහ සීලුම රජයේ රෙගුලාසි පිළිපැදීම සහතික කිරීම පුද්ගලික රාජ්‍ය අවුල්කාරීත්වය හරහා ප්‍රධාන කොටස් හිමියන්ගේ අනිකුත් කොටස් රජයට ඉවත් කළ හැකිය. මේ ආකාරයෙන් රජයේ ලාභ ලබන අතර ජාතික ආරක්ෂාව සහතික කරමින් ව්‍යාපාර කිරීමෙන් ඉවත් විය හැකිය.
Meanwhile, the government has reassured that the policy decision taken to privatize Sri Lanka Telecom will not compromise national security, contrary to what is indicated in the report compiled by the Sectoral Oversight Committee on National Security, chaired by parliamentarian Rear Admiral Dr. Sarath Veerasekara. Issuing a statement, the President's Media Division stated that the government believes that the report lacks a logical and scientific data analysis pertaining to the subject matter. The President's Media Division stated that to address this deficiency, it is necessary to examine the operation and regulation of information and communication technology service providers in Sri Lanka, analyze financial data related to the sector, understand Sri Lanka's national ambitions in the field, assess the available capital capacity, and conduct a comprehensive study of global trends. The statement went on to say that government will take a final decision during an upcoming cabinet meeting, considering this report along with recommendations from the information and communication sector. Additionally, the President's office emphasized that the current government's policy is focused on providing opportunities to the private sector, distancing it from direct government involvement. Now, the Committee on Public Finance has decided to postpone the consideration of the Betting and Gaming Levy Bill for a week until the timeline for establishing a regulatory authority for casinos is worked out. The decision was made during the committee's first meeting for the fourth session of the 9th Parliament under the patronage of its chairman, Dr. Harsha De Silva. Chairman of the committee noted that the establishment of a regulatory authority regarding the casino business was previously discussed. He went on to say that a time frame for the regulation has been prepared by the Ministry of Finance to get cabinet approval by the 31st of January 2023. However, since this has not been done, the Committee on Public Finance mentioned that a few time frames is required, adding that the Ministry of Finance will be given a period of 1 week to prepare such. In Parliament today, opposition leader Sajith Premadasa called for investigations to scrutinize a transaction of $6.9 million pertaining to the import of fertilizer from China and multi-million-dollar losses incurred through the purchasing of nano-fertilizer from India. Acknowledging the request, Minister of Agriculture Mahinda Amaraveera stated that investigations are indeed underway with regard to the transaction on the Chinese fertilizer deal in conjunction with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The organic fertilizer shipment from China, which resulted in losses of $6.9 million to Sri Lanka, led to a dispute between the two nations as Sri Lanka refused to accept the shipment of fertilizer following concerns that it contained pathogenic organisms.
චීන කාබනික පොහොර සඳහා ඇමරිකානු ඩොලර් මිලියන 6.9ක් ගෙවලා තිබෙනවා. පෝරත් නැහැ, මුදලුත් නැහැ. ඒ බැංක් ගැරන්ටි එක එන්කෑෂ් කරලා මේ රටට සිදුණු පාඩුව පියවා ගන්නට වැඩ කටයුතු කරලත් නැහැ.
ඒ වියදම් පිළිබඳව සහ ඒ හොරකම් පිළිබඳව නිශ්චිත උත්තරයක් දෙන්නේ නැහැ. දෙන්න බෑ. ඒ හොර කල්ලියම ඉන්නේ. හැබැයි අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා දැන් රනිල් වික්‍රමසිංහ ජනාධිපතිතුමා නියෝජනය කරන මේ ආණ්ඩුවේ නියෝජනය කරන මෙහෙම පැනලා ගිහිල්ලා හිටපු කවුරු හරි ඒකලකාරී නැගලා මේ හොරුන් අල්ලනවා එලි දක්වනවා හරි කියන්න පුළුවන් කොන්දක් තියෙන කෙනෙක් කියන මොකද අපිට විපක්ෂයේ ඉඳගෙන කෑ ගහනවා විතරයි. මේවා මහා ජනතාවට අයිති මුදල් මේ බදු ගෙවන ජනතාවගේ මුදල් වංචා වෙලා තියෙනවා නම් අත්අඩංගුවට ගන්නවා කියන ප්‍රකාශය කරන ඔබතුමා හරි.
ප්‍රශ්න සිය වතාවක් විතර මමත් අහුම්කම් දීලා තියෙන විවිධ උත්තර දීලා තියෙනවා. ඒකට අවශ්‍ය ක්‍රියාමාර්ග මේ වෙනකොට සිද්ධ වෙනවා. බොහොම ස්තුතියි.
බිලියන 2500 පෝරත් නැහැ සල්ලිත් නැහැ වැඩිකාරයෙකුත් නැහැ. මේක සම්බන්ධයෙන් ඔඩිට් වාර්තා ප්‍රමාද කරනවා යම් මුදලක් බේරගන්න.
හරි බොහොම ස්තුතියි ඔබතුමාට.
පොයින්ට් ඔෆ් ඕඩර් ඔබතුමා බොහොම ස්තුතියි කියලා බෑ ආණ්ඩුවේ උත්තරයක් දෙන්න.
අඩුම ගානේ කෝප් කමිටුවටවත් ඒ ඔඩිට් රිපෝට් එක ලබා දීලත් නැහැ. අපි මේ දොස් කියන්නේ මේ හොර ගනුදෙනුව එදා ක්‍රියාත්මක කරපු ඇමතිවරුන්ට මිලියන 2500ක් රටට අහිමි කරලා තිබෙනවා. ඉන්දියාවෙන් එන්නපු නැනෝ පොහොරකින් තවත් බිලියන 7කට වැඩි ප්‍රමාණයක් අලාභ වෙලා තිබෙන අපේ රට. ඉතින් මේවා මේ රටේ සල්ලි.
හොඳයි බොහොම ස්තුතියි ඔබතුමා.
ජනතාවගේ සල්ලි.
බොහොම ස්තුතියි ඔබතුමාගේ කාරණේ.
කරුණා කරලා මේක පිළිබඳව විධිමත් පරීක්ෂණයක් ඉක්මනින් පවත්වලා ඒ මුදල් ටික අපේ රටට ලබා ගන්න.
කෝප් කමිටුවට අවශ්‍ය නම් පුළුවන් මේක ජාතික වශයෙන් වැදගත්කමක් තියෙන ප්‍රශ්නයක් නම් විශේෂ සැසියක් තියලා විගණකාධිපති ගෙන්නලා තියෙන ඩොකියුමන්ට්ස් ටික ගෙනල්ලා කෝප් කමිටුවට නම් සබ් කමිටි එකක් දාලා හරි මේක පරීක්ෂා කරන්න. ඒතර මං හිතන්නේ ඔබතුමා මෙන්න මේ කාරණේ කෝප් කමිටුවේ අවධාරණයට ලක් කරන්න.
හොඳයි ඒ පිළිබඳව අවධානය යොමු කරන්න. බොහොම ස්තුතියි.
චීන පෝර නම සම්බන්ධව විදේශ කටයුතු ඇමතුමාගේ ප්‍රධානත්වයෙන් කමිටුවක් පත් කරලා රටවල් අතර තියෙන මිත්‍රශීලී බවත් ආරක්ෂා කරගෙන ඒ ගනුදෙනුව පියවා ගැනීමේ වැඩපිළිවෙලකට පරීක්ෂණයක් පැවැත්වෙනවා. ඒ වගේම අපි පාර්ලිමේන්තුවත් ඒ ගන්න තොරතුරු පිළිබඳව දැනුවත් කරනවා. ඒ වගේම නැනෝ පෝර සම්බන්ධව CID ගෙන් පරීක්ෂණයක් තියෙනවා. අල්ලස් කොමිසමෙන් පරීක්ෂණයක් තියෙනවා. අමාත්‍යාංශ මට්ටමේ තියෙන ඒ තොරතුරු ලැබෙන ආකාරය අනුව අපි විගණන වාර්තාත් එක්ක මේ පාර්ලිමේන්තුව දැනුවත් කරන්න. මේකට සම්බන්ධ වෙලා තියෙනවා නම් කවුරු හරි පාර්ශවයක් අපිට හංගන්න ඕමනාවක් නැහැ. ඒ අය එළිදරව් කරනවා.
President Ranil Wickremesinghe instructed to expedite the drafting of a legislation necessary for action plan for reconciliation. This was mentioned by the head of state during a meeting yesterday with officials involved at the Presidential Secretariat. The progress of initiatives within the key areas that include legislation, institutional activities and issues, prisoner release and power decentralization were also reviewed. The discussion focused on several important topics such as the implementation of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the establishment of a National Land Council and the formulation of a national land policy. Additionally, the President emphasized the need for enhanced operations of the Office for Missing Persons, including digitalization efforts and the issuance of certificates of absence for individuals who had previously disappeared without trace. Furthermore, President Wickremesinghe instructed relevant parties to complete the ongoing initiatives to establish the Office for Reparations and the Office for National Unity and Reconciliation within the next 2 to 3 months. It was also requested that a comprehensive report on the progress of these programs be prepared. Regarding land-related issues, particular attention was given to resolving problems associated with displaced persons, resettlement, releasing privately held lands for public use, and addressing Mahavali lands concerns. The President has emphasized the urgency of taking immediate action to settle these land-related issues and tasks officials with devising effective mechanisms for their resolution. Also in tonight's news, Indian High Commissioner in Colombo, Gopal Bagle, says India is considering the provision of financial assistance requested by Sri Lanka to extend the runway of the Palale International Airport. This was conveyed to Minister of Ports, Shipping and Aviation Nimal Siripal de Silva during a discussion today. Meanwhile, Sri Lanka Ports, Shipping and Aviation Minister requested the Indian envoy to increase the number of flights between the Indian city of Madras and Sri Lanka's Palale, taking the high passenger demand into account. A discussion between Indian High Commissioner in Colombo Gopal Bagle and Minister of Ports, Shipping and Aviation Nimal Siripal de Silva was held at the ministry premises this morning. Discussions focused on the enhancement of maritime and aviation services between India and Sri Lanka. According to the Ministry of Ports, Shipping and Aviation, several measures to elevate bilateral relations between the two countries have been discussed. The Indian High Commissioner highlighted that the Indian airline Alliance Air had successfully completed 100 flight operations between India's Madras and Sri Lanka's Palale airports. Taking the current demand for air travel between the two destinations into account, the minister requested the Indian High Commissioner to enhance the number of flights connecting the two cities and to explore the potential to extend flights from Madras to Palale up to Ratmalana in the Western Province. While discussing Sri Lanka's request for a soft loan facility from India to extend the runway at Palale Airport, which is currently under evaluation, the Indian High Commissioner said his country is actively considering the provision of the assistance requested for infrastructure improvement. With reference to the ongoing talks regarding the initiation of a passenger ferry service connecting the two nations, the Indian High Commissioner highlighted the potential for a favourable outcome following thorough deliberations by the Joint Committee. Minister Nimal Siripal de Silva also emphasised the need to accelerate the launch of the passenger ferry service between the two countries, recognising its significance in providing greater convenience for low-income pilgrims from Sri Lanka who wish to visit Bodh Gaya and other Buddhist religious sites in India. The minister has also expressed Sri Lanka's continuous readiness to welcome passenger vessels from any Indian airport while adhering to international standards. And the Russian ambassador to Sri Lanka, Levan Jagarian, extended Russian appreciation to Sri Lanka for a balanced policy during the difficult times faced by Russia. Joining the Russian National Day celebration in Colombo last evening, the envoy remarked that he hoped to continue the strong bilateral relations with Sri Lanka.
A ceremony to celebrate the Russian National Day was organized by the Russian Embassy in Sri Lanka last evening. Politicians, diplomats, high-ranking public sector officials and academics were present at the occasion. Former President Mahinda Rajapaksa also attended the event.
We established our bilateral diplomatic relations in 1957, just 65 years ago, and since that I highly appreciate the balanced position of Sri Lanka, especially now, which is very important for us now when my country is facing with very difficult problems. I mean this ongoing special military operation of the Russian Federation in the Ukraine. We asked our Western partners, or our former Western partners, to respect our security concerns. And we have a request only in terms of Ukraine. We would like to see Ukrainians as our brothers, to see Ukraine as a neutral country with no NATO bases, like some of the European countries. My question is it possible to defeat such a strong and great power like Russia? Is it possible to defeat a nuclear power like Russia? It is impossible. So if they don't meet our demands, once again, we will continue our special military operation, and let me assure you, we will defeat the puppet regime in Kiev and its foreign sponsors. Finally, I would like to express my gratitude to the government of Sri Lanka, a very friendly country for us, and hopefully our friends in Sri Lanka will continue to pursue this balanced, neutral policy which meets all our interests.
The mutual respect, goodwill, and a deep sense of solidarity define our bilateral engagement. As agreed by our two leaders in 2017 to increase the bilateral trade volume to $700 million in the period ahead, the Russia-Sri Lanka Intergovernmental Commission on Trade, Economic, Scientific and Technical Cooperation provides the structured platform to develop and further advance the bilateral economic and technical partnership. Russia remains one of the top tourist source destinations for Sri Lanka, promoting tourism and people-to-people contacts undoubtedly contributes to the economic recovery process of Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka has been supported by Russia during our challenging periods in the past at international forums. In Geneva, we have been supported. So therefore, we are grateful to Russian Federation for their support at international forums. I take this opportunity to affirm Sri Lanka's commitment to build on the strong foundation of friendship and cooperation between our two countries for mutual benefit.
The Global Sovereign Debt Roundtable to discuss debt treatment for countries in default, including Sri Lanka. IMF cautions discussions. Details after this break.
ගොඩමඩ පෙරලි කරන බලපුළුවන්කාරයා මහින්ද්‍රා යුවෝ ටීමෝ වෙතින්. වැඩම ගොඩයි ගොඩම තමයි. ස්වරාජ් ට්‍රැක්ටර් ටීමෝ වෙතින්.
අබාන්ස් මිඩ්ඩිය මෑඩ්නස් සේල් 50% දක්වා වට්ටම් සමග මාස 24ක් දක්වා පොලි රහිතව ජුනි 20 වනදා දක්වා පමණයි.
තනිව යන ගමනට නිවැරදි ගිණුම් කරන මග හේමාල් පෙරේරා. ඔබේ වෛද්‍ය ඉංජිනේරු සිහිනය සුරක්ෂිත දෑතකට ෆිසික්ස් සමිත රත්නායක.
Welcome back. In business news, we take you to the Colombo Stock Exchange. And the Bourse closed the week on a positive note at 8,818, gaining 51 points whilst displaying an overall uptrend during the day. The positive sentiment was driven by a reduction in policy rates and the downward revision of deposit rates in the banking sector, which subsequently increased the interest in the equity counters. Treasury shares gained during the day owing to a dip in bill yields and following the announcement of First Capital Holdings' divestment of 33% stake to People's Leasing and Finance for a consideration of 4.95 billion rupees. Meanwhile, market turnover hit over a 2-month high and recorded at 2.2 billion rupees, largely led by multiple crossings and contributed by the capital goods sector and the diversified financial sector. Foreign investors remain net sellers with low participation, recording a net foreign outflow of 117.7 million rupees. And the Sri Lankan rupee depreciated against the US dollar, with the buying rate of the US dollar increasing from 285.69 cents to 288.08 cents, while the selling rate has increased from 298.91 to 301.12. The Global Sovereign Debt Roundtable will meet today for technical talks aimed at resolving outstanding payments and comparability of treatment for countries in default, including Sri Lanka. The International Monetary Fund yesterday stated it expects the Global Sovereign Debt Roundtable to make tangible progress toward quicker debt restructuring for heavily indebted countries during a series of meetings in the coming weeks. However, IMF spokesperson Julie Kozak warned that the roundtable's work will be focused on broader processes and procedures and not individual country cases.
Addressing IMF's general press briefing yesterday, IMF spokesperson Julie Kozak stated the Global Sovereign Debt Roundtable will meet today in a third encounter for the group that includes representatives of the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank and current G20 presidency India to discuss paths for debt restructuring. Today's talks are expected to focus on accelerating restructuring timetables, resolving outstanding payments and improving transparency. IMF spokesperson Julie Kozak also cautioned that the roundtable's work will be focused on broader processes and procedures and not individual country cases.
And it's also important to remind that the work of the GSDR is about processes and procedures, not individual country cases. Therefore, some of the discussions are highly technical. They may take time, but we do expect to see continued tangible progress with the view of having a meaningful impact on accelerating the debt restructuring process.
The IMF spokesperson further mentioned that a workshop on comparability of treatment is to be held on the 15th of June, convened by India, France, the IMF, the International Institute of Finance and possibly China.
The April 12th meeting of the GSDR resulted in tangible progress on debt restructuring in a few areas, including information sharing, MDB provision of net positive flows of concessional finance, and further work on comparability of treatment. Now, going forward, there are a few next steps. So first, on June 15th, there is a workshop on comparability of treatment scheduled, and it will be co-hosted by the G20 India presidency, France as chair of the Paris Club, the IIF, and possibly China. Then on June 30th, there will be a deputies meeting, we expect that these deputies meetings will become regular and to take place every few months. And we're also putting in place a technical group to discuss some issues in depth, with the first meeting scheduled on June 9th of this technical group. The next meeting of principals would be expected to take place at the annual meetings of the IMF and World Bank in Marrakesh in October.
And that wraps up tonight's edition of First at 9. Thank you for watching. Good night.